Draper City Talk is a podcast produced by the municipal government of Draper City, Utah, where we discuss local government services and issues and the community at large. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Mayor Troy Walker. Welcome back to our Draper City Talk podcast. Glad to be with you today. Producing our show, we have Asia and Alex. Thank you, too, for putting this on for us today. And we have a very exciting guest, because there's nothing more exciting than talking about the money, and that is Mr. John Vuyk. He's our Draper City Finance Director. So, John, say hello.
Hello.
Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
So, John is in charge of making sure that our budget balances, that we have enough money to pay our bills, and that we don't have the luxury of, like the federal government, of deficit spending. So our obligation legally is to balance our budget every single year.
Correct.
And your job is to make sure all the counting and recording and accounting is done correctly.
Hopefully.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're glad to have you. Tell us a little bit. Give us your background. Where are you from? How long have you been in Draper? What's your education? Kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm originally from Salt Lake City, so born and raised here.
East High?
I actually went to Brighton High School.
Brighton High School. Okay. Cool.
So
all right.
Kind of probably a rival of, Corner Canyon and things. But
okay.
Grew up around Brighton High School. Went to the University of Utah, graduated from the University of Utah in accounting.
And what year was that?
1993.
Indeed. That was a good year for accounting students to graduate.
It was a good year for sure.
In fact, you and I have determined we were in the same graduating accounting class.
Right.
And we didn't know each other.
Yep.
Yeah. And here we are now.
Now we know each other.
Small world. Yes, indeed. So both of us educated at the University of Utah. Go ahead. Keep talking.
So from the University of Utah, I worked a couple of jobs in the private sector. I was working for American Stores when they decided to pack up shop and move to Idaho. So I started looking for a different job, and I went to work for Salt Lake City. I worked for Salt Lake City for a number of years. I started out in the fire department, was the fire department budget director for about 15 years. Learned a lot about fire service, more than I ever wanted to. And then from there, I transitioned into being the city budget manager. Spent about 10 years as the city budget manager. A couple of years ago, I had a great opportunity come and applied for the position here as the finance director, and thankfully the mayor saw fit to hire me and bring me over. So I've been here for about 2 years. Loved every minute of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. So just so you all know, is the directors of all of our city entities, whether it's fire department, police department, finance, I appoint as mayor. That's one of my jobs, is to find people to fill those spots. And so you came highly recommended, and we're glad to have you.
So I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about budgets.
Okay.
Most people are familiar with the term. Some people are really good at budgeting, and some people aren't as good at budgeting. And there's always like a spectrum of budgeting, but different than a personal budget or a household budget, but similar in some ways. So let's talk a little bit about when you're talking about a city budget. Talk a little bit about what's different than, say, maybe a personal budget or a budget for a company. It's a little different about government budgeting, if you could pick a few things.
So I would say the first thing that I would say is different is that with a city budget, you really have a constrained amount of money that you're dealing with. As we look at preparing a budget, the first thing that we do is we try to figure out exactly what the revenues are, and then we don't go over that. Now, that's something we should be doing with a personal budget, right, but not a lot of people, do that. Plus, we have opportunities, get a loan or put it on a credit card or a lot of different ways like that. The city can't do that. Sure, the city can bond. It can go out and, get some financing mechanisms, but we always have to have that revenue stream to be able to cover that into the future. And we don't necessarily get to grow that in any way. If you're a little short with your personal budget, you go get a part-time job and you increase your revenues.
Right.
But with the city budget, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit.
So when we talk about revenue, and we talk about it, and all of us, but it should be the first thing we all do in our budget is how much money do we make? How much do we have to spend, right? So let's talk about city revenue. Where does city revenue come from?
So the city gets revenue from a few different sources. The two main sources of revenue would be property tax, and then second would be sales tax.
Okay, let's stop. Let's talk about property tax.
Okay.
When we say property tax, everybody gets a property tax bill every year from Salt Lake County.
Correct.
And folks, if you haven't looked at your property tax bill, I am issuing the challenge. Please, when you listen to this podcast, pull out your property tax bill and look at it, because it's very interesting, right? It line items, and there's a whole bunch of taxing entities, not just Draper City.
Correct.
In fact, I can't remember how many there are, but it's more than a dozen if I'm thinking back to my bill. So you have the mosquito abatement district, the school district, Salt Lake County, the library. You have all of these different entities that get a little chunk of property tax, right?
That is correct.
And we get a little chunk of property tax. So if my property tax bill was $6,000 last year, just for round numbers, my city portion was about $600, somewhere in there, maybe a little less, right?
Probably.
That sound about in the range. So who sets the property tax rate?
So the property tax rate is actually set by the county, but the city determines exactly what those dollar amounts are that are needed to be able to do that.
And so the county can set its rate.
Correct.
And the mosquito abatement district can set its rate.
Yeah.
And all the other entities can set their tax rate. So when you talk about taxes going up, and this is something I want to make sure we're clear on, there's a lot of entities on that list that can raise that. And there are entities that have raised those taxes.
Correct.
We have done one in 17 years that I've been around. And so we, as a city, have the ability to set our property tax rate, right?
Correct.
And let's go through that process. How do we do that?
So the way property taxes work in the state is that a taxing entity is guaranteed the same amount of money that they received in the prior fiscal year, plus any new growth or different things that might have happened to actually increase that base. But the base doesn't get to grow from year to year.
Right. Now, that's a key thing, because people think, and I understand why, that when they see their property tax bill and then they see their assessed value of their home, which has done nothing but go up
Correct.
since 2009, they think, why would the city ever raise our taxes? My home has continued to increase in value. Shouldn't my taxes track my home? That's not what happens.
That is not what happens. What happens is the county determines, the county auditor, the county assessor goes out and he says, here's the value of all the homes. And then the tax department comes in and they say, okay, Draper needs $10 million based on all of those property taxes. We need to set the rate at this amount.
And that's based on what we had the year before.
Right.
So if the city council set a tax rate on your home, we're going to get that amount next year. Doesn't matter if your home went up.
You're going to get that amount,
Right.
not that rate.
Not the rate. That's the key. The amount, the dollar amount, not the increase of the value in the home. So that, I think, when we did our property tax increase, and we're going to talk about that, a lot of people didn't understand that. And I think when they understood it, they were like, oh. And that's one of the reasons why cities have to do tax increases.
Correct.
Because nothing holds us to inflation. And folks, we've had some inflation. I mean, you can't deny it. Inflation has hit us in every angle. Okay, so property tax. What percentage of our budget, our city budget, is property tax?
It's close to 40% of our total budget.
So out of my $600 I pay, that's contributing to all of our city services: police, fire, parks, roads, all employees, everything. That's coming out of it. Okay?
Yes.
And that's 40%. So then the next source of revenue you said is?
Sales tax.
Okay, let's talk about that. How big is that 60% of our budget?
It's probably close to another 40%. And then beyond that, there's some other fees and different things that the city generates to be able to bring in some of that other additional money.
So the 20% that's left is coming in from permits, business license fees that we charge for things we do.
Possible grants, other things like that.
So folks, if you think of our budget and we need 100%, 80% of it is coming out of the two taxing sources. Now, the city council can change the property tax portion and increase the tax rate and get more money to run the city. That's something the council can do. And there's something you can do to make our budget flow better, and that is buy stuff in Draper, because we get a portion. What is the portion of a dollar?
So
say you spend $1 at In-N-Out Burger, how much are we getting?
So if you spend $1 at In-N-Out Burger, you're taxed about 7% on that, right? So 7 cents is set aside for sales tax.
Okay.
Of the sales tax, then that is divided among a lot of different entities. But 1% of that goes to the cities and the county. And the 1%, so 1 penny out of every dollar goes back to the city. But even that's not 100% accurate, because we get half of the 1% for anything within Draper City, and then a portion of all of the sales within the state at at a percentage of the population of Draper versus the state of Utah.
Okay, so this goes back to a long time ago. I had somebody ask me, why did you get involved in Draper politics? Why did you run for office, like as a council member? And I remember distinctly why. I got my property tax notice when I first moved here 21 and a half years ago. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, that's pretty low for what I'm getting. But I realized that if we didn't increase our sales tax, get more sales tax revenue, that property tax portion would just continue to go up, 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 and up, because the government has to run. So my goal has always been high quality business in our community, and we have a lot of amazing businesses. And so I'm pleased with that. Over the years, we were one of the first cities that went to the International Retailers Convention, and we would garner real retail products to come here. So economic development doesn't just happen. It takes a little bit of planning and some aggressive, going out and saying, hey, this such and such store, we have a good spot. You got to come here and look. Now the market drives, most of it, but a city government that's willing to accommodate business and accommodate retail sales primarily is a city government who's looking out for its citizens, because we're trying to find a way to pay our bills that doesn't come out of your property tax, right? I mean,
that's a great way to do it. And Draper's been very fortunate. I mean, we've seen years where 15% increase year over year from a sales tax perspective, and that's additional money that comes to the city strictly through the sales tax and not out of somebody's pocket from property taxes. Now, they're still paying for it, or at least a portion of it. The good part about that is, though, somebody like me who doesn't necessarily live in Draper, I live in West Jordan, I buy something here and I'm contributing to Draper's economy through you having those, businesses and everything here in Draper that attract everyone.
And folks, we require all of our employees to buy everything in Draper. That's just one of the requirements of employment. No, I'm just kidding. But that's a good point. So cities over the years in the state, knowing this tax formula, the cities that are savvy have increased their commercial opportunities on purpose to offset that property tax hit. And so a lot of cities have done it. Now, I look at some of our businesses that are amazing. Furniture business, amazing. We have all kinds of furniture options. Frankly, road-based gravel, amazing business. We have restaurants. We have car dealerships. We have all the things that are retail-based. So I always tell the youth council or kids when I meet them, or people that are Draper citizens, I always tell them, if you're going to buy something, if you can buy it at home, you're just helping your own community. You're just helping you're keeping your property tax low, because the more you buy, the bigger our sales tax, the less we have to take from property tax.
And you said buy it at your house, and that's
yes,
equally
let's talk
true,
about that.
because we get from a point of purchase, right? So if you buy something on Amazon, the point of purchase then becomes your house, and so we're receiving that as a revenue stream at the 50% of the 1%. So that really does help boost things. So buy on Amazon and other online services.
Mrs. Walker has been contributing at the Amazon store a lot. So have I, because I like to buy stuff from my computer, and that's a great point. You know, if you're going to buy a car, you know, try to make it a Mercedes, Ford, or Toyota if you can, if you're buying a new one. If you're going to buy a used car, we got a lot of those good places. If you need some rock, sand, and gravel, we got a place. You know, if you want to eat, have a good meal, we got a lot of those places. You need furniture, buy it here. I mean, it's really like buy home. It's really, it's truly how you can actually help your community with you're going to buy it anyway, buy it here. I mean, that's really all you can do, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, it's if we can really focus on purchasing in Draper, then we really do see a greater benefit there. I mean, it's a difference of 1 penny versus, you know, I'm trying to do math in my head. Sorry, about 7 pennies, right? If you buy in Draper, we're going to get 7 cents. If you buy someplace else, we're only going to get about 1 cent.
Right. So, folks, if you're buying and shopping, our grocery stores are fantastic. All of our businesses, we have a tremendous business community and a tremendous retail community, and that wasn't by accident. I mean, it's by design. Our councils have over the years, and Mayor Smith was committed to it. We've been committed as a community to having solid business because we understand that pays our bills. Now, when you talk about property tax. Now, my son made this comment to me the other day. He says, well, you don't really ever own anything, Dad, you know, because you've got to pay property tax. And I think he's right. I mean, you know, if you don't pay your property tax, what happens?
Well, look, somebody's going to come in and take that property from you.
Yeah, you could pay your house off and you still owe the tax, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not going away. And it's insidious in that sense that you could work your whole life, pay off your home, but you still have to pay that property tax. So consequently, when we look at raising your property tax, we understand that is a big deal because that's a source of revenue that you always have to pay, even if your home mortgage gets paid off.
Right.
And so we're judicious generally about whether or not do we need to do a tax increase? If we do, it's got to be just the minimum that we need. Let's talk about over the years, and it's not the case now, but over the last decade, sales tax for us has been something that's gone up. We've had an increase in sales tax revenue year over year. Is that right?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that, like to explain what I mean by that.
Well, I think, you know, as the economy has continued to flourish, everyone has really spent more. We've seen growth in our salaries, and prices have really held fairly firm until the last couple of years. Now you're seeing that contract a little bit with the cost of inflation rising, and people are really kind of scaling back some of those purchases that weren't necessarily, you know, have-to-haves, because the have-to-haves are costing more.
Because if you're looking to buy a Ford truck 3 years ago, and you could buy that truck at 2% or 2.5% interest, or maybe no interest, depending on the deal, it wasn't that big of a deal to go buy your new truck. But if you got to buy it today and it's 7% or 6.8, it's a big deal.
Right.
And it's had a cooling effect on purchases, like big purchases. It certainly, you know, chilled it down a little.
Oh, for sure. I think the rise in interest rates and just the rising costs. I mean, we've seen that, you know, just inflation, you know, has hit everything that we buy. And, you know, the car companies have had to increase the cost of the vehicles, just like food and everything else has continued to rise.
I remember when I was first elected as a council member, we could pave a 60-foot wide, 1 mile stretch of road. So pick any road in town, 60 feet wide, 1 mile of asphalt, you know, 3 inches. And it was about $800,000 a mile. That's what I remember. It might have been 600 to 800. Today, do you know what the cost is per mile?
I don't know.
I do. It's like 1.2. So it's doubled in price. The asphalt, the construction, If we try to buy, replace a water line, the pipe has gone up double. I remember when we started our fire department, we went from no fire department to a fully functioning fire department in 9 months. We couldn't do that today for one reason. I actually got to go with the fire chief to the fire truck store, which was one of the coolest things I've ever done. It's Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where they build fire trucks, Pierce Manufacturing. It's just a place where they start from steel and they hand make them all the way up. Phenomenal place. But we could buy a fire truck. We could go there and pick it out and buy it. And it was $1 million for a fire truck, like, say, our ladder truck was about $1 million. Other trucks were about $800,000. Today, that ladder truck, you're a fire service guy. What's that? What did we just order one for?
We just ordered one for $1.8 million.
So from $800,000 to $1.8 million in 7 years. Now, if you don't think we have inflation, then you're not paying attention, because we do. And how long is it going to take us to get that fire truck?
It's 4 years out.
All right, do you hear that? 4 years. We started our fire department, we bought those trucks and had them in the same 6-month period. Now, you couldn't do it. 4 years. So we're paying $1.8 million for 4 years out to get a new fire truck.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really a lot of planning, it, not just for the dollars and cents, but making sure that you know when that vehicle's going to reach its useful life, and so you're trying to project a lot of different things. So that's a tough job that the fire and fleet have to do, is to try to balance how that works and when do we order that and
so
bring something in.
Replace the old one, right? When the old one, hopefully the goal is the old one wears out, we sell it for a little bit of money and put a new one on service. Same with police vehicles. Let's just talk about police cars. What do we pay for what's a police vehicle cost all equipped?
All equipped, it's about $80,000.
Okay, so $80,000 with everything the officer needs to function, lights, computer, all the stuff.
Right.
How many years are we getting out of our police vehicles?
We are trying to get 6 years out of a police vehicle.
Okay. Now, folks, if you haven't done a ride-along with our police, I would like to challenge you to come and do a ride-along, because you will see how hard these vehicles are used, because we cover flat land and the top of Suncrest. And if you don't, if you own your own car, up and down and all around. But I think 6 years is pretty good for the way they drive them. So 80,000 every 6 years, but what was it a few years ago? Do you remember when we were buying them, like pre-COVID? It was like 40, if I remember.
I mean, even when I started 2 years ago, it was about 60,000. So it's gone up 20,000 over the last couple of years.
20,000 a vehicle, yeah. And then, of course, like I said, everything's gone up for us.
And that's, I mean, you think about police officers, every officer has a vehicle. That's 50, 60 vehicles at $80,000 each. So it's a big commitment for the city. And trying to plan that out is really one of the things that we're working on, and trying to make sure that we have a flow of cash to be able to replace those vehicles in a timely manner, so that they can get to the places they need to get to when that emergency happens.
Yeah, because one thing is for sure, if you call for a policeman, well, first of all, if you're calling the police, something's going on.
Right.
Because, you're normally like calling them to have them over for, a coffee. But if you call a policeman, you want one, because you need one. So you want them there quick. Now, if you call a fireman, you're either dying, having that heart attack, or your house is on fire. And so you want them there in a couple of minutes. And so having well-maintained current vehicles that can do that job is our job to deliver as a city.
Absolutely.
So you talk about, then we just talk about the vehicles. Let's talk about employees. How many employees do we have, roughly?
There's approximately 360 full-time employees within the city. Now, that takes a part-timer and adds them up to get to a point where it's a full-time position.
Because we have a lot of part-time firefighters who work,
but part-time, not firefighters, but parks workers and other.
Okay. But if we pared it down, it's just barely over 300 actual full-time individuals, but 360 when you add in. So a city our size, 51,000 plus, under 350, 360 employees. I think it's pretty lean, but people cost money, and people cost a lot because people are what do the work. So let's talk a little bit. We did a tax increase a year ago. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Last 1 year ago.
And the purpose of that tax increase was to increase the pay of our firefighters and police officers, right?
Yep, that was a portion of it, and then we added a few positions within each of those departments.
We added a few officers and firefighters. So folks, when we raised that tax rate, that was what we were doing it for. We've never come to the taxpayers and said, hey, we're just going to do it for fun. But one of the interesting things is as we are dealing with this inflationary world, what does our future look like? Let's talk really briefly about the challenges ahead.
I think you hit on it, especially the challenges ahead are just trying to meet the demands of those inflationary increases that the city's seeing. And how do we do that with somewhat of a static revenue source? Right. And that either means that we look at the service levels that we have and where can we reduce those, or we look at other options on how do we increase revenue, some of those revenue streams.
Yeah. So you can raise taxes, you can hope people buy more in Draper, but as we deal with, or we can cut services. We can say, we don't need this many police officers. Our response time could be smaller or longer, or we don't need as nice a parks as we have, or we don't need to do as many events as we do, or whatever the things we're spending money on. But when we get into the budget this next cycle, as we get into it, we're going to do that same thing. We're going to look at our revenue. We're going to look at our expenses. And when you talk about inflation and real inflation, I hear this 3% or whatever. It's way more than that. I mean, just look at the cost of vehicles. I mean, to me, it seems like it's more around the 5 to 6% really true inflationary rate. But none of us can get away from that. We just can't. We get a little bit of revenue from the state to help us with our roads, but primarily we're responsible as a city to take care of our roads, take care of our parks, take care of our open space, take care of our employees, make sure that everybody has the vehicles and the things they need. So what do you think the future looks like for us?
Well, I would say I'm an optimist, so I like to say the future is always bright, and that there's certainly ways to be able to meet the demands that are coming. But I see an increase in those demands, and so trying to figure out how to meet that on the revenue side is something that we'll work with the city council and the mayor. They've been great to work with, and we'll figure out exactly how we do that, whether that's bringing in new businesses or what those different opportunities might be.
Yeah, and when we think about everybody's properties getting taxed, again, when the portion's only 40%, property tax doesn't pay the bill. I mean, it just can't. I mean, we could make it pay the bill, but your tax rate would be substantially higher. And there's philosophies out there. There's people that do public finance that think that property tax should cover the entire portion of the municipal services, and anything extra should come out of the sales tax. And there are some cities that tax that way. We don't. We have low tax. Would you say our tax level is low?
Yeah, the tax rate in Draper is very low. It's second or third lowest within the Salt Lake Valley.
And that's even after our modest tax increase from
Correct.
The year before. Yeah. So overall, we're a low tax city, but we have a lot of upside and potential business revenue coming and things like that. Well, so you're an optimist. You think
Always.
That our future looks bright. We're obviously going to have to pay attention and focus, but by and large, how many people do you have working for you helping you prepare the budget?
There's 12 people within the finance department. Really, we have 4 accountants that kind of work on some of the pieces of that budget and that preparation.
And next week, we're going to approve our tentative budget for 2026.
That is correct.
So, folks, if you want to know what we're spending your money on, come to the meeting next week or pay attention. Go look at it online. It's online now.
It's available online right now.
And you can make comment on it. You can certainly think about it. But I encourage you to look at our budget, look at where we're spending the money, look at how we're spending it, look at our sources of revenue. Because, it's really just my philosophy of government is we have as little to do with your life as we can, but yet at the same time, I want high quality service. I want that high quality emergency service. I want that high quality of life, our beautiful parks, our opportunities, recreation opportunities. We want good employees that can service our needs and communicate our message and make people feel at home and like this is where they live and it's their place and they can be comfortable and they want to be here. And so those are all things we think about as politicians. And I appreciate your help in helping us budget for it. Anything else you want to say in closing?
I don't think so. I think, again, thank you for letting me come on and have a little bit of time to talk. And I do, like you, I encourage people to really get involved and pay attention to what those budgets look like. It's available online, and we'd love to hear your comments and input.
All right. Well, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, that's another edition of the Draper City Talk podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. For timely information about Draper City news, events, traffic alerts, and public safety emergencies, you may subscribe to email or text notifications from Draper City by visiting draperutah.gov/notify, or follow us on social media at Draper City, Utah on Facebook, at Draper City on Instagram and X, and at Draper City Gov on YouTube. This has been Draper City Talk. Please join us again.